So there's three things that we're going to talk about today. One is user acquisition, two is user engagement, and three is user loyalty. And I'm going to kind of tell you about how we've done that at Sandboxx and a few opportunities for you to do that as well. So who am I? Well, my name is Jeremiah Runser, and I'm the head of marketing at Sandboxx. And for the past 13 years or so, I've been leading user acquisition, demand generation, brand marketing, creative, kind of the gamut of marketing across B2B SaaS and B2C mobile tech products. I've also worked at Toyota. So I mean, I've kind of done a wide variety of things. And all that kind of culminates here at Sandboxx. And what we really do is I spent 17 years in the Army. And in that time, I kind of vowed I'd never go back and work for the Army again. And I don't, but I work a lot with the Army and the military now. And what we really do is we have a mobile app. So Sandboxx is a mobile app. You write your letter similar to the same way you'd send or build an SMS message on your phone. We take that message, we print it in our office in Arlington, Virginia, and then we next day all of that mail in physical form to all base mailrooms for all basic training locations for every branch of the military. And we do that for about 60% of all the military every single year. And why that's so unique, because a lot of people don't often get this, is you can't use your phone at basic training for any branch of the military. So physical mail is the only way that you can stay connected. So what does that look like in numbers here? So we've got about 218,000 monthly active users, about 36,000 monthly new supporters, and I'll get into that here in a minute, and 6.5 thousand monthly new recruits. So of these users that sign up for Sandboxx, on average, they have around 4 supporters per recruit. Now, as you can imagine, they're not there very long, and I'll talk about that again here in a second. But we've sent about 11 million letters to all basic training locations since 2016, and we've got 3.5 million users in our app right now. So why is onboarding so important to us? Well, it really breaks down to one thing, and that's 10 weeks. So when you show up to basic training, on average, basic trainings can range from 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, up to 22 weeks for what's called one-station unit training. But generally, it's about 10 weeks of basic training. So when a user signs up, if they don't actively engage within usually a day or two, we lose the opportunity to continue to engage with them throughout their entire life cycle. And that's super important because if we capture them at the earliest point of their military career, then we have that whole 10-week period to optimize that user's life cycle. If not, even if we miss them by a week, that's 10% of the time we could actively engage this user. And whenever we're talking, $30, $60, $70, depending on what type of user it is for user LTV, we really have to, at a micro level, optimize every single thing that we can. So early acquisition for us leads to increased user LTV through prolonged service usage. So I ask very often on a regular basis, what levers can we pull that will have the biggest impact on a few things? And what we often find are there's 3 key metrics, and it's sign-up rate. So how many people can we get to sign up based on the number of eligible population? Number 2, it's really first to second purchase. And number 3, it's TTV. And does everyone here know what TTV is? Raise your hands. Okay. I'm going to talk about it pretty extensively after this. So we measure TTV, which is time to value, by sign up to first purchase. So how long does it take somebody to sign up for your app or your product, whatever it is, to make their first purchase? And that can be measured differently. Like, I don't know if anybody who here has a mobile app? Okay, I would imagine. That sounds about right. What's your app? What is it?
A bank.
A bank? Okay. So what would be like the most valuable thing somebody can do to become a long-term user?
Personal loan, credit card.
Okay, so they open some sort of account, right? Right. And that's kind of what we're looking for. For Facebook, I think Facebook was sign up for Facebook, add 7 friends, and you got like a 70% more likelihood of actually becoming an active user on the platform. So TTV is that, right? So what we do is we look at our TTV is 8.9 days, and that was in Q1 and Q2 of 2023. And how do we take that 8.9 days and decrease that as much as possible? And when we can pull a lot of these micro levers, a lot of what we're focusing on, I mean, we could change the entire onboarding flow, right? We could change a bunch of things about the app. But most of what we can do actually starts like these micro adjustments. So what we set out to do was, let's look at messaging first. From the time that somebody first hears about us, how do we take them and activate them much faster? And that's just, I mean, like, and I don't want to, preach marketing here, but I think that's the value of just the way you say things and how much impact that can have. That's what we really focus on here. So there's 4 key topics. For the first experiment we did, number 1 was have fewer messages, which sounds sort of counterintuitive, but I'll get to the reason why here in a second. Number 2 was have a clear value proposition. Number 3 was use maybe unique languages. And I wrote rhetorical devices here, but just think of how you can creatively say what you want to say. And number 4 was easy enablement. So for number 1, having 4 sends versus 3 sends. How can we consolidate the messages that we send and really optimize for that very first message? And that's between 2 channels, email and SMS. And I'll kind of extremely briefly describe how the onboarding process works in most cases. So you go to basic training, you get there, you get your address as a recruit. Once you get your address, we give you a card. You fill out that card, you write all of the people that you want to notify about your address to write you, and once you write that down, you send that card back to us, we process all of that data, and we send these notifications out immediately. So if your mom and your son sends you, you send us this card, the son sends us this card, we send a notification to mom, hey, sign up for Sandboxx, here's why, right? So initially what it looked like was on the left here. It's very kind of static, there's a lot of text in it. It works, it wasn't like the best way that we could have done this, but I think that the big message here is focusing on value versus features. And the first one is like, here's everything Sandboxx does. And on the right-hand side, this is more like, hey, here's the first name of the person that wants you to write them. Here's your name. Here's a little bit about who we are. Here's a CTA to start doing it. And then anything else you want to know on the right-hand side just kind of cascades down below that. And all of that information becomes available. You don't have to use it. It's just there generally. The next message that we send out, which I'm not going to get into, is really just kind of compounding on that first one. And the text message went from being this long to being this long with a very clear CTA. And we took an emotional approach to it versus like the transactional approach that they historically were. And we're showing versus telling. And you can see on the left-hand side, eventually when it scrolls, there is kind of a list down at the bottom versus just having a structured 3-step process on the right-hand side. So that change alone resulted in a 21% decrease in time to value. And why that's so important for us, we did this experiment in Q1 and Q2 of 2024. Why that's so important for us is we've now got our TTV down below 7 days. Now ideally we get it lower than that, but if we get down below 7 days, that means we can actively sign up and reach time to value for a user in the first week versus the second week. So we don't lose that first week anymore, and that gives us more opportunity to actively engage that user. Now the other 2 metrics that I mentioned earlier are the 2 main ones that we want to focus on next, which is sign-up rate and repeat purchases, because you have to see enough value in the first purchase that you make the second purchase. So I'm not going to get into that too much right now, but happy to chat about that later. All right, so we've got them in the app, right? How do we keep users actively engaged? Because this is a very sensitive, emotional time, and it's also a super short amount of time for these users. Well, the first one, weekly training updates. So we've got about 164 different versions of these updates. They're all available via a data feed in the app. And this content is dynamically distributed on a weekly basis via SMS, email, push notification, app inbox, and what's called embedded messaging. We can see the scrolling section right here. And what this does is, when you're on week 1 at Fort Jackson for Army basic training, you get a notification for week 1. When you're at week 2, you get a notification for week 2, and so on. But what these are primarily used for is writing inspiration for anybody that's writing a recruit in basic training, which allows them to actively understand what's happening, because most of them haven't gone through this, and then they can continue to write. So though this is free, it's one of our biggest drivers of recurring revenue. Next thing, story-based content. So this is powered by a company called Storyly. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Storyly before. They basically have like Instagram feed type content. But you can see over here on the left-hand side, it's those 4 little bubbles, and they look just like an Instagram or a Facebook story. And what these do is they populate content either from a story, from a platform like that, or stories that you build natively. And we use these actually a lot for all different types of things because you can segment them pretty specifically, but one of them is for referrals. So as soon as you sign up, referrals right there. And I touched on this a little bit ago, but we have a user LTV, and I would imagine most people measure their user LTV or customer LTV depending on what kind of business you are. But we also have what's called a recruit LTV because each recruit actually has their own support network. So it's really beneficial to optimize for that recruit LTV because if we get one recruit that signs up and they only add 4 people, but we can generate 4 or 5 more referrals, that recruit LTV nearly doubles. And now we've optimized for that versus just individual users, which costs more to acquire. And last, real-time letter tracking. So whenever you write a letter, we have an API with USPS, and that letter is tracked. Whenever you write the letter, it's overnighted, so there's no need for us to track that because it gets to the base the next day. But on the reply mail, when a recruit writes back, you can see the real-time updates of your letter that's being delivered back to you, which brings people back into the app, and typically they go from this screen to the next screen to start writing the next letter. All right, so I'm trying to wrap this up if we do have questions, but I'll kind of recap what we talked about here. I think there's 3 primary things that we can focus on, at least initially for the user onboarding and engagement side. Accelerate user onboarding, streamline the sign-up process, optimize for TTV, and ensure the user's experience a benefit quickly, because what you want to do is make sure that they see the most value as quickly as possible, but again, to that second purchase, make sure the value isn't like a facade for maybe to be let down later. So always optimize for that, but really show like why your product's valuable to them. Number 2, enhancing personalized engagement. So we use that through the stories, the weekly updates that I talked about. And what we've really done with that is we take that content that's hyper-specific to them, so if they get an email about it or a notification, it doesn't feel like it's out of place. It feels very, very deliberate. And number 3, optimize for a second purchase. So how do you take that user that converts one time and quickly get them to convert to a second purchase? Because that's where we really build long-term user engagement. Because primarily, of the users who actually sign up, I said 68% of them finish the sign-up process and make a first purchase. Around 56% of them wind up making a second purchase. And of those 56%, it just decreases by 5 to 10% after that. So there's a pretty big drop-off from 1 to 2, but from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, that's very, very low. So I wrap that up as quick as I can. I got 2 minutes left. If you want to ask any questions right now, I'm happy to do that. But again, thank you so much. I really appreciate you all coming out here, and thanks for your time. I hope I covered a lot in 15 minutes.